Welcome to the Deep Dive, the place where we take a mountain of sources, press them into a diamond, and hand it straight to you.
And we have an absolutely massive dive for you today.
We really do. We are navigating a truly unique narrative, one that spans from, well, the gritty streets of 1840s London all the way to the highly volatile political catacombs of 1897 Paris.
It's an incredible web. We're delving deep into history, art, politics, and a highly advanced brand of, for lack of a better term, cosmic warfare.
That's absolutely right. We are grappling with a complex set of sources here. This whole thing involves historical figures like Charles Dickens, the profound social instability around the Dreyfus Affair.
Right, and the chemical dangers of the absinthe epidemic, and really in the heart of it all, a pair of secret societies locked in this decades-long battle.
A battle over what, though? That's the key.
Over an artifact that isn't just a piece of miniature architecture, it's quite literally tearing space-time apart right above the City of Lights.
So our mission today is to decode all these elements. We need to figure out how a moldering old toy maker in the 1840s, a piece of scandalous antique furniture, and these immense high-level time distortions registered in the late 19th century.
Distortions that are exponentially greater than anything previously recorded.
Exactly. How are all these things bound by a single terrifying cosmic conflict? This isn't just history. This is an in-depth investigation into a conflict that is operating across multiple dimensions and really centuries simultaneously.
And we should frame the complexity immediately for you, the listener. This isn't a simple Victorian melodrama, not at all.
Wow.
It's a multi-layered espionage battle. It's operating across temporal, political, and dimensional boundaries. The stakes are, well, all of Paris, and the focal point, the eye of this cosmic storm, is a small, seemingly innocent piece of miniature architecture. A doll's house.
A doll's house.
That object is the key to understanding why two human factions are risking total annihilation just to get their hands on it.
Okay, let's unpack this dense narrative. And I think we have to start at the earliest verifiable historical anchor point we have, 1840s London. Specifically, Charles Dickens, and what our sources claim is the root cause of his late career literary schist, a truly hostile and terrifying toy maker named Montague.
So we open in London, and Charles Dickens, I mean, he's at the absolute height of his career, but he's struggling.
Right, he's trying to get his new venture, the Daily News, printed, but it's just not happening. There are delays, problems.
He's already under enormous professional stress, and then he's confronted by this stranger, Montague, a man who is just incandescent with rage about one of his characters.
The sources describe Montague's anger as almost a physical force. He felt utterly maligned by Dickens' recent work.
Specifically, it was the depiction of the misanthropic toy maker, Tackleton, in The Cricket on the Hearth.
Right.
Montague saw this character as a direct, hostile caricature of himself. He believed Dickens was mocking his profession and maybe even his, his private life.
And the sources paint a very vivid picture of this man. He's a moldering old toy maker living down Billingsgate Way, feared throughout the neighborhood, not just for his temper.
But for an almost supernatural malice, there's something deeply wrong with him.
But this isn't just some standard literary grievance, is it? This is the prologue to a much deeper, century-spanning cosmic conflict.
Exactly. Dickens hadn't just conjured Tackleton out of thin air to insult some elderly toy maker he'd met.
No, the initial idea for the character and the entire setup of the story, it came from an old manuscript, Patrick Mather Hyde's History of the Parishes of York.
And that book specifically recounted the downfall of a real firm, the Coxham firm of Montague and Tackleton, way back in the late 1780s.
So there's a real-world basis for the character.
A real-world basis and a real-world scandal. And that downfall is the critical link here. The firm's demise involved a spectacular public scandal surrounding a piece of miniature architecture.
The doll's house.
A specific doll's house built to be a miniature replica of a local mansion, Ilbridge House. So Montague's intense resentment against Dickens wasn't just about literary criticism.
No, it was about dredging up the past.
It was about protecting the secrecy of the Ilbridge House doll's house, the core artifact of his power, and preventing the public from remembering this deeply humiliating scandal from his past.
The sources are clear that Montague didn't just stop at verbal threats either. He committed a physical, intellectual act of sabotage on the Daily News.
He tampered with the printing proofs. And we're not just talking about rearranging some type. The sources imply something far more unsettling, almost preternatural.
What do they say happened?
Dickens found the proofs, the pages ready for printing were warped, the text was twisted and maybe even contained these bizarre, unsolicited little stories about miniature violence, just horrible, tiny, violent scenes appearing in the text.
That is terrible.
And it terrified Dickens, the confrontation and then the sabotage. It pushed him to the point of a complete psychological breakdown.
So he fled London. He just abandoned the whole daily news project.
He did. And the critical insight provided by the sources is the direct, demonstrable effect this had on his literary output. The books he wrote from that point on, his later works, were profoundly colder and bleaker than any he had written before.
So this meeting didn't just stress him out.
No, it fundamentally changed the tone and the emotional landscape of his entire career. It suggests Montague's hostility was powered by something that could actually invade the creative spirit itself.
That makes a chilling amount of sense. If Montague is connected to something that can warp reality even subtly, the effect on a highly sensitive creative mind like Dickens would be catastrophic.
Absolutely.
And just to set up Montague's sinister reputation a little more, the London press had apparently already reported on the so-called pygmy murders in the Times.
Right, so this guy was already associated in the public mind with strange, small, and violent incidents. He wasn't just a disgruntled businessman. He was an object of genuine public fear.
The fear was so intense, we learn, that Dickens, years later, only dared to go back to the area of Montague's shop under the safest possible conditions.
High noon on the longest day of the year. Maximum daylight.
And when they finally found the shop down Billingsgate Way, it was a blackened shell, utterly burnt out and abandoned for decades.
Which suggests an early disaster, right? A fire that likely occurred about 20 years after the Dickens confrontation. A disaster that was severe enough to destroy the building, but
maybe not the core asset he was protecting.
Precisely. Which brings us back to that central artifact, the doll's house, the miniature Ilbridge house. The blackened shop confirms Montague's continued failure to secure it, but the house itself remains the central icon of power for him and the Brotherhood he secretly leads.
It's the vessel for whatever ancient force he's channeling.
Exactly. And its profound importance is why, decades later, the conflict has shifted continents. It moves to 1884 Paris.
And here we find the opposing factions fully formed, the Montfalcon family, who are protecting these artifacts and dealing with their own innate powers.
And the Fraternal Brotherhood. The descendants of Montague's legacy, now led by Jean Mayer the Grand Master, and his two brutal agents, Vires and Boucher.
And the Montfalcon family is directly targeted because of 6-year-old boy, Emile Montfalcon.
Yes, the Brotherhood agents kidnap Emile, believing he carries devil's marks. They claim they want to free him, but their methods are just horrific. They see the boy as an object to be repurposed for their own nefarious aesthetic goals.
The violence of the kidnapping really underscores the extreme stakes here.
Oh, it's brutal. Emile fought like a mad thing. The sources detail these startling physical mutations that are the visible signs of the power he possesses.
His voice changed, it became eerie, his skin was rough, his nails were like talons.
And in a terrifying moment of self-defense, he fastened wolf-like teeth into Vires' shoulder and just tore a jagged strip of flesh away. He was involuntarily transforming under the duress.
And the cruelty of the Brotherhood is immediately apparent in their response to this.
Absolutely. Boucher, described as utterly cold, wanted to immediately gut the boy. He saw him as just a creature, a failed experiment.
Not a child at all.
No. And when Vires hesitated, Boucher dropped the child with this massive two-handed blow to the head, intending to knock him out and contain him in the vats for Montague's specialized transformative processes.
Horrifying.
Yeah.
And Emile is later identified as the only known shapeshifter in the family's ranks, possessing powers that are completely outside of his control at this stage.
Which confirms that the conflict, which started with an antique scandal over miniature architecture, is now a war over genetic artistry and living conduits of immense cosmic power.
The source they're fighting over is clearly potent enough to influence human evolution, creating these powerful but unstable mutants. So the centuries-long feud, the scandal, the genetic mutations, all of this leads to the physical effects of this power struggle on the reality of 1897 Paris. If these two factions are fighting over something that literally warps DNA, what is it doing to space-time?
That's the billion-franc question.
So we fast-forward from the brutal kidnapping in 1884 to 1897. But first, let's step outside linear time for a moment, to 1995, where a time traveler, Ace, detects the measurable magnitude of the crisis using a highly sophisticated time sensor.
And this is where the scale of the cosmic threat becomes, well, terrifyingly clear. Ace is in a St. Vincent cemetery in 1995 Paris, and she detects not just a time rift, but a severely distorted one.
What does that mean, a distorted one?
She sees flares of gangrenous light instead of the normal blue-green temporal disturbance. Her miniature quartz-rotted time sensor registers the true problem. It's the psionic signature emanating from the past.
We need to contextualize the metric here, the Van Talle psychoscale. What did Ace detect, and why is that number so alarming?
The Parisian air in the late 19th century was described as being spattered with splodges of psionic energy, registering nearly 6.2 on the Van Talle psychoscale, or VPS.
Okay, 6.2. What does that mean for you and me?
Well, this is a scale designed to measure the density and magnitude of psychic or sentient energy in a given area. And the doctor himself had previously told Ace that the highest reading he had ever encountered was 5-point-something.
And what was that 5-point-something reading from?
That specific reading, the 5-point-X, was generated by a planetary telepathic gestalt fueled by multiple acts of genocide.
Wait, a planet-wide psychic scream from mass death was a 5, and this is a 6.2.
Exactly. If the highest ever recorded reading was linked to planet-wide genocide and mass death, a 6.2 implies, well, the jump is exponential.
That's not just alarming, it's almost incomprehensible.
It is. A 6.2 implies a psychic magnitude so immense it could only be generated by a young Assyrian, a type of ancient, hugely powerful entity, or what the sources term a capitalized evil from the dawn of time.
So not a human-scale problem.
Not even close. This force isn't just locally powerful. It's acting like a monumental anchor in time, distorting the very flow of the time vortex. Ace specifically notes that between 1884, when Emil was kidnapped, and late 1897, the time vortex was suffering one cracking big snafu.
Which means this immense, uncontrolled psychic flux immediately affects the very technology designed to traverse time and space. The TARDIS materialization in 1897 is catastrophically distorted.
The normal sound of arrival, that gentle wheezing, is replaced by an indescribable noise. The crew hears a noise like everyone in the TARDIS screaming, followed by the doctor yelling something that sounded like Cantorian event manifolds as he's physically thrown across the control room.
So the external psychic pressure was actively interfering with the ship's own sophisticated systems.
Oh, completely. And the interior of the TARDIS was compromised. It was, for all intents and purposes, spiritually haunted by 19th century Parisian consciousness.
What did that look like?
Roz notes that the ceiling, normally the smooth opalescent field, had become a jigsaw of paintings, resembling the winter hobby room of intelligent insomniac bees.
That's an amazing description.
Isn't it? They were seeing ghostly stained glass light and projections of 19th century furnishings all over the control room. It was as if the psychic residue of Paris was forcing its way into the sensitive Time Lord technology, using the visual and aesthetic language of the era.
And the doctor concluded that someone is trying to tell us something through these aesthetic and temporal disruptions.
Right. It wasn't just noise. It was communication of a sort.
So if the TARDIS is being affected this severely, how are the regular citizens of Paris coping with this overwhelming psychic flux? The answer, ironically, involves their favorite vice.
Absinthe.
We meet David Clayton, a talented but profoundly despairing New England art student living the bohemian life in Paris.
He's neck deep in debt, surrounded by parties, and he's drinking absinthe heavily to try and quench his dreams. He's trying to dull this overwhelming artistic sensibility that he possesses.
But this isn't just recreational drinking, is it? This absinthe is a highly dangerous chemical cocktail. Our sources go into detail on the composition, which is key to understanding its psychoactive effect in this psionic environment.
It's truly toxic stuff. The base ingredients, anise, fennel, nutmeg, juniper, hyssop, are soaked in incredibly high-proof industrial alcohol, sometimes up to 85% proof.
85%.
And critically, it contains wormwood, which, when distilled, yields the potent psychotropic drug thujone. The combination was so powerful, inducing these terrifying hallucinations and associated violent crime, that the term absinthism was actually coined to describe the resulting mental illness and societal danger.
So the doctor immediately spots David Clayton as the perfect victim in this scenario.
Instantly. He identifies him as a natural size sensitive who should never be consuming a potent hallucinogenic like absinthe. David is effectively pouring fuel onto his own psychic fire.
And we see an immediate involuntary manifestation of this combined chemical and cosmic energy.
We do. When a man bumps into David in a cafe, he drops his Panama hat. David strains mentally to retrieve it, just wishes he could get it back, and he unconsciously wills the hat to him.
And what happens?
The hat flies across the room and smacks right into his hand with a palpable force. This wasn't a magic trick. This was David involuntarily channeling that massive 6.2 VPS reading psychic energy spike.
So wait, the implication here is that every latent psi-sensitive person drinking absinthe in 1897, Paris was unknowingly becoming a tiny conduit for this massive cosmic power spike.
That's exactly it, and the leakage was pervasive. David himself observes that half the writers and painters in his bohemian circle are affected.
In a way.
They're engaging in involuntary artistic creation. They're writing or painting while they're asleep, sometimes producing masterpieces, sometimes producing things that are completely bizarre or terrifying.
The source mentions a banned French play, right?
Yeah, a play that was written entirely while the author was unconscious. This links directly back to that overwhelming psychic energy. The Parisian consciousness is being warped into a weaponizable commodity.
And this raw energy, generated by the Quoth artifact, is precisely what the two warring secret societies are attempting to harvest and control.
It's the ultimate pride.
Let's pivot to the two main factions who are using Paris as their unwitting battlefield. The raw psychic energy is the prize, and they are using political maneuvering and grotesque transformations to secure control of the doll's house. We had to start with Montague, the toy maker, and his Brotherhood.
Montague, having survived the fire and relocated his operations to the boneyards under Montrouge, the Paris catacombs, is leading the Brotherhood with this chilling, singular vision.
And what is that vision?
His ultimate goal is a form of grotesque immortality. He wants to transform his followers into perfect, living dolls and puppets, reshaping the human form to meet his own aesthetic ideal.
This sounds far more sinister than simple political control. This is the ultimate expression of the toy maker, who was first exposed in the 1780s scandal over the Ilbridge House miniature.
It's the exact same impulse. Decades later, he's applying that twisted aesthetic to human flesh.
And we see the results in his agents. David Clayton, after falling into the hands of Montague's rival, Thomas, is then processed to become suitable for Montague's forces.
Right, and he transforms rapidly into this rage-fueled mechanical fighter. Those sources describe him as like fighting a mechanical crop picker, a mindless, immensely powerful, and violently efficient automaton.
The antithesis of human nature.
Completely. And this grotesque artistry extends even more tragically to Claudette, David's reluctant girlfriend.
Thomas transformed her first, right?
Yeah.
Using the Quoth energy to create his twisted version of beauty.
Yes, enlarged, elven eyes, unnaturally white skin, making her resemble a helpless infant or the subject of a bizarre neotic makeup effect.
And then Montague gets his hands on her.
And Montague then took her further, altering her into a thing of lust for his own purposes, a tragic living doll. This second horrific transformation is what drives Claudette to seek vengeance against both Thomas and Montague.
So this theme, the desire to reshape humans into aesthetically pleasing or functional objects, that's central to the Brotherhood's philosophy. It's their ultimate aesthetic crime.
It is. Now, opposing Montague is Brother Thomas, the Grandmaster, also known as Jean Mayer. He leads La Fraternité, operating under the guise of a benevolent lay brotherhood, but he is deeply immersed in sophisticated political subversion.
And his tool of choice is different from Montague's.
Very different. Mayer's tool is sophisticated mind control, or mesmerism. The source explicitly refers to the technique as creating a little version of Mayer in the victim's brain.
A little version of Mayer.
It allows him to subvert their will, take complete control of their conscience, and dictate their actions without them even realizing it. He systematically extended this control through his political contacts, the wealthy elite, and his circle of private patients.
It's a fascinating, almost paradoxical mix of interests he has. He's obsessed with highly refined genetic artistry creating novelty roses, these rose delphinium hybrids. And yet he uses the same controlling impulse on the political landscape of France.
Yes, the impulse is the same as Montague's, that desire to reshape the natural world and dictate its patterns, but Mayer focuses his art on botany and political influence.
And he used this sophisticated mind control network to heavily influence the Parisian political environment during the extremely volatile Dreyfus Affair.
He did.
Let's detail that connection because the political context is crucial here. The Dreyfus Affair was tearing France apart, rooted in deep-seated anti-Semitism, military secrecy, political corruption.
It was a powder keg. And Jarre, the dedicated investigator, discovered through his research into Mayer's activities that the Grand Master had been systematically poisoning the minds of influential political figures.
Like who?
He targeted people like Clemenceau, using his mesmeric control to shift public and political opinion violently against Captain Alfred Dreyfus, the Jewish artillery officer who was wrongly convicted of treason. This subtle, targeted mind control was Mayer's contribution to the larger cosmic war-creating political chaos to mask his true operations.
And assisting Thomas Mayer in all this is Dr. Miracle.
Dr. Miracle, a physician who is essential for identifying targets. He helped categorize psi latents like David Clayton, classifying him as a Class 3 latent on Thomas's scale.
Miracle is a critical character because he seems to be driven entirely by fear.
Completely. He is complicit in the Brotherhood's activities, but he is terrified of both Thomas or Mayer and Montague. He viewed David Clayton as too dangerous to simply hand over to Montague without Thomas vetting him first.
And so he was trying to slow things down.
He was. Miracle was attempting, in small ways, to slow the massive influx of psi latents that Montague was rapidly converting into his human puppet army. He was fearful that the influx of power would lead to an even bigger catastrophe.
Now we introduce the third major faction caught up in this mess. The remnant French intelligence community. This is the Shadow Directory, or Directoire Ténébreux.
And we meet them through Inspector Jarre, a dedicated officer within the Sûreté Générale, but revealed to be a key agent of this directory.
And Jarre is frustrated.
He's frustrated by the corruption endemic in the Ministry of War, specifically with figures like Major Henri, who are attempting to redirect Shadow Project funding away from the directory and into their own pockets.
Jarre is actively investigating the murder of Jean Meilleur, who is Thomas, and his findings confirm the extent of the Grand Master's pervasive control.
He noted a distinct pattern. Politicians were rapidly shifting alliances and changing positions after Mayer's death.
Which confirmed that Mayer had been dictating their loyalties right up until he died.
Exactly. And the directory's motivation is complex. It's not just about fighting corruption, it's about state security. They were deeply concerned that Mayer's faction had been working in concert with corrupt military figures like Major Henri to frame Dreyfus.
So they needed to restore order and protect genuine French intelligence interests from the pervasive political rot that the fraternity's mind control had introduced. And into this mess walks Chris.
Oh, Chris. He's undercover as Jean-Paul Armand, supposedly a new gendarme assistant transferred from the Alps. He presents forged papers signed by the Minister of War, which is the first red flag for Jarre.
Why is that a red flag?
A good spy would have known to appear average. Chris's papers are too efficient, too perfectly signed off. It's suspicious.
And Chris's sheer immense competence only deepens Jarre's suspicion that he's an outside agent, or a plant, by the corrupted Ministry of War.
It really does. The sources detail the specific tests Jarre uses to gauge Chris's reliability. He doesn't just ask for a resume, he tests his physical limits.
Right. He forces Chris to perform 200 press-ups, 100 with each hand, to test his physical discipline and stress response.
That is a brutal interrogation technique hidden as a physical assessment. Then came the intellectual assessment, a grueling criminology quiz focusing on minute details of Parisian law and criminal procedure. And finally, the marksmanship test.
And Chris aces it.
Of course he does. Despite having to adjust for the recoil of a standard issue weapon, he scores 97%. Jarre finds this highly irregular. It's too perfect for a gendarme from the mountains. This whole interaction sets up their dynamic. Jarre is suspicious of everyone who seems too competent, and Chris is just too competent for his own good.
So this intense political background, the Dreyfus Affair, the Directory versus the Ministry of War, the psychic warfare, all of it is powered by the ultimate prize.
The doll's house?
The miniature Ilbridge house, which is actually a piece of colossal alien technology. We have to now shift our focus entirely to the cosmological scale to understand the true source of the problem, the Quoth.
This is where things get really wild.
To understand the 6.2 Ventalo reading and why Paris is on the brink of vaporization, we must pierce the veil and understand the civilization responsible for this time distortion, the Quoth. Our sources describe them as a race of immortal, ageless, and supremely pattern-obsessed artists.
The Quoth originated not just in another dimension, but on their own colossal work of art and engineering. A time engine.
A time engine. Try to help us visualize this.
Their homeworld was a massive fabricated cylinder of neutronium, a material of staggering density, the remnants of a collapsed star, And this cylinder was a light day long.
Hold on, a cylinder of neutronium the size of a light day. That level of engineering is it's beyond belief. How did the sources possibly convey the mechanics of that without resorting to pure fantasy?
The key is its physical consequence. This neutronium cylinder was spinning fast enough that its immense gravity distorted time itself. This continuous, powerful time flux was the environment in which the Quoth evolved.
So they weren't just artists.
They were artists whose entire civilization was built on controlling and reacting to temporal distortion. Their whole existence was dedicated to creating vast works of art and forming pleasing congruencies of form and substance.
So their evolution was based on aesthetic changes designed to deflect and control the time flux. They were thinking beings who changed their own forms willingly to fit the harmonious themes of their race. This sounds like an impossible utopia.
It was, for a time, until the first blight.
The blight.
The blight was the catalyst for their species' downfall and the subsequent cosmic war. This blight caused their children to be born frustratingly perfect.
Perfect. How is that a problem?
This perfection disrupted their entire aesthetic drive for change and creation. For the Quoth, who lived to amend patterns and seek evolution, perfection was the ultimate inescapable death of art. It was a crisis of meaning and existence.
Wow. Okay, so the catastrophe that brought them to Earth.
It tore a physical fragment, which the sources call the node, from their space. This node, carrying the essence of their time engine, eventually shattered when it fell toward our planet.
And this is the profound realization that connects the ancient scandal to the cosmic war. The doll's house, the miniature Ilbridge house that Dickens knew about.
Is, in fact, the collapsed Quoth space projected into Earth's reality.
It's a dense, miniaturized focus point for the Quoth's reality warping abilities.
Which is why Montague views it as the central icon of power for his dark artistic pursuits. It is a portal, a power source, and a repository of immense temporal energy.
The terrifying implication, then, is that the two warring factions, Montague's Brotherhood and Mayor's Fraternité, are not just fighting over an antique.
No.
They are pulling on this node, this fractured piece of a neutronium time engine, so violently that they are literally jeopardizing the structural integrity of space-time over Paris.
That's the crux of the crisis. The psychic energy emissions that registered 6.2 on the Vantala scale are causing the structure of space-time to stretch to its absolute fracture point.
And the doctor's analysis describes this as an unnatural condition and a weakness that allows
rogues and vagabonds, like the ancient Montague, to seize the powers of gods.
And we must emphasize that the ultimate danger is not localized destruction. The sources predict a cataclysmic terminal event if this disruption continues.
The danger is the literal end of physics in that location. Continued space-time disruption would cause space itself to heat up to an astronomical temperature, approximately 10 to the power of 32 kelvins.
10 to the 32nd power. I can't even picture that number.
It's not just an explosion. This is the temperature required to unify the strong and electro-weak forces. It's a breakdown of the very laws of physics, which would utterly vaporize Paris and everything around it, a return to a state of singularity.
And the irony is that the Quoth themselves, in their frantic survival efforts, are unknowingly contributing to this disaster.
They are. They're seeking birthing material from other clusters, driven by the desperation caused by the blight.
And the massive energy spike detected in 1897 is identified as the war.
The war, which is actually a Quoth war leader named Truth Seeker, traveling from its distant cluster toward Earth. It was misled, thinking the dense psychic energy signature indicated a source of life-giving birthing matter that could undo the blight. This war leader is essentially a sentient, massive temporal distortion.
But the war leader, later referred to as Blight Ender, was also flaying a false premise.
Yes, they realized that their original Quoth homeworlds were not a haven from the blight, but the very central core of it. They only found a hollow mimicry of birthing matter there.
So the war leader's journey to Earth was born out of ultimate desperation, having been misled by the strength of the psychic signature emanating from the doll's house fragment.
Absolutely. So we have a literal cosmic war led by a highly rational, pattern-obsessed alien entity hurtling towards a fragment of its former home, the doll's house, while two warring secret societies are using the energy from this fragment to play power games in the Parisian political catacombs, all leading to the brink of physical annihilation.
Which all culminates in the final, spectacular confrontation under the streets of Paris.
Exactly.
The final stand takes place deep in the catacombs under Montrouge, where Montague has established his boneyard lair. The Doctor and his allies, including the Directory agent Frances Duquesne and the newly controlled Emile, need to defeat Montague's puppet army.
And simultaneously stop the incoming Quoth war leader from anchoring itself to the doll's house.
The primary defense against Montague's rapidly transforming mechanical puppets relies on the unique genetic power of the Monfalcon family.
Specifically, Emile's father, Dominic. He's a flamer, a member of the family who can generate bolts of blue fire from within his body, often fueled by intense stored anger.
And Emile, having observed this power, now possesses the intellectual insight into its physics, despite his own recent shape-shifting trauma.
He does. He deduces the mechanism. The flamers spontaneously combust by rapidly taking a naturally reactive substance, like magnesium or calcium, from within their own bodies, transporting it to the surface of their skin, and exposing it instantaneously to air.
That is a truly incredible, painful, and powerful ability.
Oh, yes. And Dominic uses this spontaneously generated combustion to create a raging protective barrier of blue flame in the tight catacomb tunnels, protecting the remaining allies, Roz, Clarissa, Pierre, from the onslaught of Montague's rage-fueled mechanical fighters.
And meanwhile, the doll's house, located nearby, is the epicenter of the entire crisis.
It is. It's revealed to be the focus point of the Quoth war leader's consciousness, actively drawing the intense time energy to that specific spot, preparing for a materialization that would finalize the cataclysm.
And the ultimate resolution relies entirely on Emile Montfalcon, the shapeshifter.
The doctor refers to him as the empty vessel, the only person psychically sensitive enough and genetically connected enough to communicate with the Quoth.
But he needs a boost, right? The doctor's plan requires technology to boost Emile's mental capacity.
Yes, he puts Emile's mind into a machine, boosting his thoughts to be quicker, sharper, and more accurate. It makes him capable of logical, high-speed communication with a colossal, pattern-obsessed alien entity.
And Emile uses a disk of black fire, a physical manifestation of raw Quoth power, to communicate with the doll's house, which is Quoth space itself.
He manages to convince the war leader, Truth Seeker, who is dedicated to saving his race, that Earth is not the right target. It doesn't hold the viable birthing matter they seek.
This is the critical moment.
Yeah.
The Quoth, despite being a capitalized evil in terms of raw power, are fundamentally rational.
Supremely rational. They accept the logical conclusion presented by Emile. They decide to dismantle their war, their massive temporal construct, and conduct a mass exodus.
So where do they go?
They choose to colonize the neutron star found by their surveyors, a location with the appropriate physical conditions needed to circumvent the blight, thereby avoiding the core aesthetic problem that was actually residing in their original space.
So the energy flux is stabilized, the imminent threat of 10 to the 32nd kelvins is removed, and space-time is repaired.
But the historical cleanup on Earth is messy, particularly in the realm of politics. The Quoth war leader's intervention leaves behind a complex moral and political dilemma.
Absolutely. The politicians Mayer had subverted using his advanced mesmerism were rebuilt by the departing Quoth. They wake up younger and critically missing all the recent embarrassing memories.
Specifically, they have no recollection of their involvement in framing Dreyfus.
Which is a historical tragedy in its own right.
It is. The doctor observes it in real time. He notes that a politician who inadvertently frames a member of an unpopular minority, or who is coerced into doing so, is highly unlikely to admit it once the memories are gone. They immediately start rationalizing their past actions, believing they did the right thing based on their current cleansed memories.
So the historical truth of Mayer's deed corruption is lost to convenient amnesia and self-justification.
It just evaporates.
And Jarre's ultimate goal, achieving justice by exposing the corrupt Ministry of War and those who framed Dreyfus, that fails completely. The Directory's goal of uncovering the full truth becomes politically and practically impossible.
Jarre is forced into a corner. He agrees to a complete cover-up of the entire cosmic incident. He acknowledges that the time travelers must be forgotten and slighted, ensuring no official record of the impossible events remains.
Why?
Specifically to protect the Shadow Directory from the massive scrutiny that would follow if the truth about alien intervention and psychic control were to become public. It's an act of self-preservation for his organization.
And finally, a brief moment of levity for our agents. Chris, who had been tied up and successfully pretending to be the doctor to avoid being exposed as a time traveler, is finally released by Jarre.
And Roz, who had been actively fighting the mechanical puppets and was intensely frustrated with Chris's typical lack of situational awareness.
But also grateful for his unintentional backup in the confusion.
Right. She finally expresses her complicated feelings by kissing him. A well-earned, chaotic human moment after navigating alien aesthetics and near-cosmic annihilation.
The dust settles, but the scars, both political and personal, remain.
They always do.
So let's recap this dense, incredible journey we just took. We started in 1840s London, examining Charles Dickens's psychological trauma and his fear of a toymaker named Montague.
A fear rooted in a decades-old scandal involving a miniature doll's house.
That house, decades later, was revealed to be the fractured fragment, the node, of a civilization called the Quoth, who lived on a time engine, a cylinder of neutronium, a light day long.
And the Quoth were immortal, pattern-obsessed artists whose aesthetic dispute over perfection almost caused the literal end of physics above Paris in 1897.
The doll's house powered a hidden war between Montague's Brotherhood, who were creating grotesque human dolls, and Thomas's fraternity, who were using mesmerizing political control to subvert the Dreyfus Affair.
All of this chaos necessitated a time traveler's intervention and the ultimate rational decision by an alien war leader to seek out a suitable neutron star instead of anchoring to Earth.
And the fate of the central artifact, the original shapeshifter, is equally fascinating.
It is. Emile Montfalcon survives, and in 1903 he opens a bookshop. He keeps the now harmless doll's house, the miniature Ilbridge house, quietly on a shelf. But the final nugget of information in our sources provides a chilling literary connection.
Tell us.
Emile's last customer, before he discards the man's card, is Montague Rhodes' James M.R. James, who would go on to become the famous English ghost story writer.
No way.
Yes. And James is specifically interested in the doll's house's peculiar history. He notes definite possibilities regarding the miniature architecture. It suggests that even the seemingly mundane, antique origins of supernatural horror stories might be rooted in the very real and terrifying events that occurred when the Quoth space collapsed on Earth.
Wow.
Which raises our final provocative question for you, the listener, as you reflect on this incredibly deep dive. How many real-world anxieties, from intense social turmoil like the Dreyfus Affair, to the sudden darker tone of late Dickens novels, to the genesis of classic supernatural fiction, might just be tiny, comprehensible ripples from invisible cosmic warfare operating just beyond our perception?
And what massive, unharnessed psychic force is being wasted in your own city right now, just waiting for the next Montague to exploit it? That's a deep dive for another day. Thank you for joining us.
Until next time.